I am an honest guy who made an honest mistake. I was there. I survived. His breath was right against my neck. At 15, I too thought I could take on the world. I thought, this is it. This is actually the end. I'm not going to hurt you. I survived. I'm going to tell you about that. I am an honest guy who made an honest mistake. I was there. I survived. His breath was right against my neck. At 15, I too thought I could take on the world. I thought, this is it. This is actually the end. I'm not going to hurt you. I survived. I'm going to tell you about that. Welcome to Extraordinary Stories Podcast. Hey, how are you? Are you well? Are you good? I am. Okay, big response to the last episode. The ghostly goings on. Ooh. Now I know lots of you have got in touch with me and asked about Leah's story. Now I've reached out to Leah and I've asked her to get back to me and let me know how she is getting on at the moment, and when she gets back to me, you will be the first to know. Big response to Lorraine Ledwell's story as well. So again, thank you Lorraine for sharing that. Alright, this short Survivor series, what the hell is that about? Well, I'll tell you. You know I love a Survivor. That Destiny's Child song, I mean, that's my life. That is my life. And I listen, and I hear what you say on social media or in your emails, and I know that you like Survivor stories. And boy, oh boy, do the stories that I am going to tell range. Some are true crime, some are just bonkers, some are real, some are not. It is a big selection. So we're going to start the Survivor series with story 1. I was there. Are you ready? Okay, let's go. On September the 11th, 2001, an event took place which would change the world forever as we knew it. Of course, I'm talking about the Twin Towers. The awful attack where 2,966 individuals died. died in New York, and of course the images that we just will never be able to get out of our brains. I think the images of the Twin Towers, it must be, I don't know how you would even record this, I don't know how you would even know this in any way. You probably could never record this, but I genuinely think they must be some of the most seen images around the world in terms of exposure, but also just in terms of images that live in your brain. They've got to be up there as probably the image that we all can't forget or can't not see or unsee. So I'm going to tell you this, right? I'm taking a small fucking sidestep before I've even got to the story. But before I go on to the main story, I'm going to tell you this because I think you might be interested to know it. Maybe you won't. Maybe you're like, Barry, just shut up and go on with the story. It was a 9/11 story that back, say, maybe like 2 years ago, possibly even 3 years ago, that was the very, very seed of this podcast. So I happened upon a documentary late one night, and it was a man called Jose, and he was a Twin Towers survivor. Now, I'm watching this documentary late night, and here he is, he's talking about his experience of surviving 9/11, being in the tower, surviving the attacks. But you know what fascinated me? What fascinated me were his descriptions of his survival. I was listening to him and thinking, am I listening to someone with false memories? And so I started to look a little bit at Jose's story. I started to look at some stuff online because I was really interested in it. I was really just kind of wanting to know what he had to say. And I realised that when I went back and I looked at a lot of his early recollections, his recollections were the plane hit and I just had to get out of the building, I just had to survive, and that was it. And then as time went on, those memories became much, much more detailed. And he could remember every moment of every second. He could remember the texture and the smell. He could remember everything. And then before you know it, he's on TV and he's telling these stories about how he can actually remember the moment when he jumped from the building, and he can remember what he saw as he jumped and all this sort of stuff. Now, I'm not saying for a second that Jose's story is not true. I think what fascinated me is the fact that obviously someone has attached to that story and gone, he's a survivor, but let's now pull out the story of the survival. And I don't want to use the word embellished because then I sound like I'm making him a liar, and he's not a liar. But it's just interesting that his story over time has grown, and more and more and more detail is added to it all the time. And that's what I found fascinating. Not the actual real story of him surviving it, but actually just the progression of the story over time. I just, honestly, at the time, right, I remember telling so many people that story. I was like, oh my god. So I watched this documentary, right, and it was about this guy and he survived the Twin Towers. But you know what really fascinates me? Do you think it's false memories? What do you think that is? What do you think this embellishment is? And literally, I was getting to a point with people where they were like, oh, for fuck's sake, Barry's telling the bloody man that survived the 9/11 attack stories again. But you see, that's right, I'm just telling you now, that's the point you want to get me at, right? Because when I'm at a party and I've had a drink, I just want to tell stories. I just want to be like, oh my god, have you heard this story? I'm just going to tell you, right? Because see, once the 5th or the 6th drink happens, it's all over. Party Baz comes out to play and doesn't want to tell stories. Party Baz just wants to get up, play music, get everyone up dancing, and be like, listen to my beautiful singing voice, and just try and get a sing-along going. Anyway, yeah. So, bizarre. Jose, I think, Actually, his story, I think, was the deep root of where this podcast actually started. And yet, strangely, I've never told his story. Back to that day, that terrible, terrible day. And I don't need to hit you over the head with the stories of the people who died, those who survived, and the effect that it had on those involved that day, on America, on the world, and even still to this day. But we will zoom in on one person, Tanya Head. Tanya Head was born in Barcelona, Spain in 1973. Hello to the 206 Spanish listeners to Extraordinary Stories, or hola, as you would say. Hola, amigo. That's hello, friend, if you're not a Spanish speaker like myself. Now, Tanya belonged to a big family, and they were a very wealthy family, a very prominent business family, and they had lots of money. Now, growing up, Tanya was very independent. She was a bright young woman. She had, and this kind of came from her family, they all had a sort of eyes on the prize focus. You know, they were that kind of just like focused people who wanted more, looked to the future. It was about more power, more money. It was about gaining all the time. And so she went to the University of Barcelona and she achieved her master's degree in business. So with a master's degree and a really bright future ahead of her, she moved to the USA in 1998. She worked for various different financial companies, and quickly she rose through the ranks of those companies to a mid-management level. During the time that she was living in the USA, she meets a man called Dave, and they have a relationship. That relationship develops and they get engaged. So she's working hard. She's earning the dollar. And she gets a job, which means that she will be working within the Twin Towers. To be precise, the 78th floor of the South Tower. So while she works in the South Tower, her fiancé Dave, he works in the North Tower. And so, on September the 11th, 2001, they both set off for work together. They arrive at the towers and they go their separate ways, planning to meet that evening at 6 o'clock, get dinner and go home. That doesn't happen because at 8:46 a.m. the first plane hits the North Tower. That's the one that Tanya's fiancé Dave is working in. When she sees that the North Tower has been hit, she immediately panics and thinks, has my fiancé survived this? Before anyone knows what's happening, the second plane hits, and it hits the tower that Tanya is in. She says this: I remember the air being sucked out of my lungs as the plane impacted the building. I saw the plane as it came towards us. I felt my body in flames. My body was burning. My right arm was severed and hanging by a thread. Some tissue in my arm was holding it together. I was thrown across the room and I passed out from the impact. She says, when I woke up, there were people running, screaming, and there were bodies lying everywhere. As I crawled through the carnage in the direction I thought was safety, I passed a man who would never make it down to safety, and he handed me his wedding ring, and he asked me to give it to his wife. She says, eventually I spotted a man in a red bandana. I didn't know at the time who he was. The man she's talking about in the red bandana was Wells Crowther. He would later become a hero of the 9/11 attacks, giving up his own life to lead 12 people to safety. So he stretched out his hand to Tanya, and she says he helped me to safety, only to disappear back into the plume of smoke. She says I made it down the 78 flights of stairs just in time. When the towers collapsed around me, I was thrown under a rig. 6 days later, I woke up in a hospital burns unit, a Jane Doe. Only later did I discover that Dave, my fiancé, had died in the North Tower. Now, I can't even imagine the confusion, the carnage that the city must have been under. And of course that went on for months and for months and for months. Hospitals must have just been in a meltdown, receiving bodies all the time, people who were injured, people coming in unidentified, people trying to find loved ones. Just chaos, just fucking complete chaos. But when Tanya wakes in the hospital and she can recall her story, she becomes immediately one of the survivors that people want to talk to. They want her story. And Tanya, she is only too happy to talk. Now, of course, she's grieving the loss of Dave, but she will describe in detail what I just read to you a minute ago. 20,000 people survived from within the towers, and of those people, Tanya Head made her way quickly into the spotlight. She would start press statements with this: I was there at the towers. I am a survivor. I am going to tell you about that. So she had a really badly scarred arm, and people really wanted to just see photographs of what a 9/11 survivor looked like. Now, what makes Tanya's story even more incredible, especially for the press and for the world to hear, is that she was one of only 19 people who survived. Only one of 19 who were above the point of impact. Does that make sense? So, where the plane hit, there were floors above it, and you would assume that anyone above those floors would, just be brought down with the absolute carnage of it falling. But no, 19 people survived, and Tanya was one of them. And so she rose quickly through the survivors to become a really well-known face and figure. So among the many, many things that she was involved in, she was appearing in documentaries and retelling her story. She was talking to writers who were creating books about the attacks. She was talking to national radio stations, and she was on Oprah. Yes, Oprah. I would love to meet Oprah. I mean, if anyone knows how to get a fucking story out of someone, it is Oprah Winfrey. I mean, me and Oprah, what a team. If anyone knows Oprah, get in touch. Get her listening to Extraordinary Stories podcast, because I'm telling you, me and Oprah, we could do something amazing together. Oprah could get all the big, like, you know, she's got the pull, she's got the power. She could get all the, like, really big stars, and I could do all the, like, really, like, the digging work and all that. I could be like, I could really get into their soul. I could be really good at that. Barry and Oprah. What a team. So, Tanya, she started a 9/11 Survivors Network online, and it became really popular. So she's got this online group, and lots of people who survived the attacks, whether in the towers or on the ground, or firefighters who survived it, they were all starting to kind of come towards the network that she was building. But at the time, there was already another network of survivors, and it was called the World Trade Center's Survivors Network. Catchy. Well, yeah, of course, Welsh are going to call it, but it's a bit wordy. So when they heard that Tanya was doing this, they thought, well, okay, but well, we already exist. So why she created this separate one? Why is she doing that? But here's the thing. Tanya was now a name. She was a recognised face. She was almost becoming the face of 9/11 survivors. Do you know what I mean? Like, she was becoming this really, like, big, famous face of it. So the other organisation, they have to go to Tanya and actually say, well, I know you're running your survival network. We've also got one. Maybe we should merge? And she thinks about it and she says to them, well, we could do that. But the thing is, I would need to lead the organisation. Now, the guy who's running the original one is a bit like, okay, who is this woman that, like, but remember what I said about Tanya earlier on. She came from a family of business-minded, focused people, and it was all about leading the way. It was all about getting the most. You know what I mean? It was all about being at the front of something, and so he eventually goes, yeah, okay, we'll merge our survivor networks, and you can be the head of it. So she becomes the president of the 9/11 Survivors Network. I mean, I imagine she is walking into those boardroom meetings and she has literally got someone behind her playing Destiny's Child. I'm a survivor. I'm not gonna give up. I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna work hard. I'm not gonna dish you on the internet. My mama taught me better than that. Oh my God. Oh, why have I not won X Factor by now? Remember what I said about her? She's business-minded, she's sharp-focused, she's Beyonce. So, she gets described, Tanya, as a giant in the room. It's said that other survivors felt humbled in her presence because her survival from above where the plane hit was so unbelievable. She was one of 19 people that survived that. So therefore, that gave her this bigger status. It meant that Tanya was somehow a more important survivor than the others. What she does is she very quickly gathers a group of survivors around her, and they become like her kind of posse, her close little group. And she fights really hard to basically have complete control over the Survivors Network. This all leads to photographs being taken of Tanya with New York Mayor Michael Bloomberg, former Mayor Rudy Giuliani, and George Pataki, former New York Governor. Tanya had developed a following. The press loved her. The public, they sympathised with her. And the city of New York, they respected her. Let's quickly revisit the statement that she liked to use at the start of every interview. I was there at the towers. I am a survivor. I am going to tell you about that. One major problem here, and I know lots of you know this, some of you won't. Tanya was nothing but a big liar, pants on fire. I was there at the Twin Towers. No, you were not. I'm a survivor. Again, no, you're not. I'm going to tell you about that. Yeah, don't bother, sweetheart. It's all lies. Tanya Head was born in Barcelona. Alicia Esteve Head. Now, the part about her family is true. Yes, they were a business family. Yes, they were wealthy. The fact she had a master's is true. The rest, a complete lie. Alicia Head, aka Tanya, wasn't even in the USA on September the 11th, 2001. She was studying at the time in Spain. She didn't arrive in the USA until 2003, 2 years after the event. At which point, she changed her name, she created the whole story, and before she knew it, she was sitting on a sofa with fucking Oprah Winfrey. Now, how did all of this come to light? Well, it started with some really savvy journalists at the New York Times. So, right, what they were doing was they were pulling together a piece looking back at the day in question. And of course, what they wanted was to look at the 9/11 survivors. And they wanted to speak to Tanya, the president of the survivors. And so, as part of their article, they started to research her story. Now, firstly, they stumbled when they couldn't find the following information. They couldn't find her name on any records of staff who worked in the building. They thought. Odd. Weird. So then they started to go through her previous interviews. And they saw that every time she talked about it, the story of the man who gave the wedding ring and said, "Will you pass this to my wife?" The details were just getting a little bit sketchy. Now, surely the press would want to see a reunion between Tanya and the wife who lost her husband, but that didn't exist. And the reason is because it wasn't true. And this is some good Jessica Fletcher style detective work. They went through every interview that she had ever given, and they began to notice that in some interviews she calls Dave her fiancé that died in the tower, and in some she calls him Dave her husband who died in the tower. Well, which one is it, Tanya? Because you can't have a fiancé and a husband, you fucking idiot. I mean, what a fucking idiot. So what happens when Tanya, or Alicia as her real name is, finds out that she is being investigated? Well, immediately she turns down a series of interviews. She won't talk to the New York Times. She won't talk to anyone at this point. She just will not talk to the press. They go back to the Dave story, the fiancé stroke husband. And they realise that actually what she's done is she's used the name David Suarez, who was a man who actually did die in the North Tower that day. The name that she was using. And they find out that actually when they go to his family, they're like, no, we have never heard of Tanya. David was not involved with anyone. In interviews, she's told the press that she attended Harvard University. New York Times, they go to Harvard. They have no record of Tanya. So with her completely refusing to talk, and now what's actually happening behind the scenes is a panic is setting in for those in New York, like the mayor, like the former governor, all those people who had trusted her. They're panicking, but they're also going, I think the article needs to be released. I think we need to actually expose her as a liar. And they do. And when the article comes out, a storm happens. An absolute storm of rage. People who had believed for years that she was this incredible survivor were absolutely livid. They were so angry to discover that they'd been lied to. They'd been tricked by this woman. So she goes into hiding. She refuses all phone calls. She won't talk to anyone. And here's the thing. My question here is, Tanya, stroke Alicia, why? Why? Just why? What are you doing? So what happens from here? Well, she vanishes. She's gone. The general belief is that she went back to Spain and that she went into hiding for a few months. However, she comes back to New York. And how do we know that she is back in New York? Well, a filmmaker had befriended Tanya during the time when she was hot in the press and people wanted her story. And he was planning to make a film with her about her survival. Now, he'd obviously at this point realised she's a liar, she wasn't even in the country, none of this is true. But he's still walking about New York, making different films, and one day he sees her in the street. And he just gets overwhelmingly so angry when he sees her. And he takes his camera, he's still got his camera's still on. And he walks up to her and he's shouting at her. And I get this, he's shouting, how dare you, how fucking dare you still be living in this city? How do you show your face in this city when actually people really fucking lost their lives that day in that building, and you have fooled fucking everybody, and you have the cheek to come back here and live in fucking New York City where you've lied to people, you have led everyone down the garden path and real people died. She gets really aggressive back. She gets mega aggressive. At one point she tries to grab the camera out of his hand. But back to the why. Why? Why do that? Why be that person? I mean, I can question a lot of things in life. I can question a lot of the decisions I've made in life. But That is such a reach. That is so big. Tanya, or Alicia as her real name is, had apparently always suffered from weight problems in her life and had always felt like an outsider. And apparently, from a young age, living in Barcelona, she had an obsession with America. As a child, she'd made up imaginary friends and she lived in a make-believe world. But before you start feeling like, okay, I'm sorry for her, maybe there's a mental health issue, she had been tested from the age of 12 for mental health issues and nothing ever showed up. She just liked fantasy. She just enjoyed fantasy. She saw 9/11 as a chance to make her mark on America and find her place within it. Yeah, fucking yeah, whatever. So fucking what? Like, I love Berlin. Am I going to fly out there, set up a new life with a fake name and fool lots of people into thinking I'm somehow a part of history? No, I'm not. No, I'm not going to fucking do that, am I? I think for me, the thing that's the absolute punch in the stomach, the absolute kick in the balls, is that she took up so much airtime. She gained so much fame. She essentially stole all of that away from the people who actually deserved it. The people who actually survived it, and that pisses me off. So to end the story, I'll give you the detail that actually pushed me over the edge with this story. You remember that I mentioned Wells Crowther, the man who went down as a hero after the attacks because he saved people from that building, but ultimately he died himself. Well, when Tanya was big in the press and people still thought that she was this incredible survivor and she was president of the Survivors Network, his family reached out to Tanya and they asked, could they meet with her? And she did. She went to dinner with his parents, and they are so deep in their grief at the loss of their son. And over dinner, she sat there and she said to them, your son was so brave. On that day, he saved my life. And with the absolute bare arsed cheek, she said, I still have the burned clothing I was wearing the day your son saved my life. I will send you a piece of it, as it was one of the last things that he touched. And her parents cried because they were so happy that she was going to send this. One of the last things her son ever touched. Did she ever send him anything? Of course not. She didn't have it because she wasn't there. Oh, the rage. Oh my god, the rage she brings me is unbelievable. Now, I like a chancer in life. I'm always attracted to a chancer. People who wheel and deal and just like to get their way through life. But that's just unacceptable. As I said, I just think it takes away from people who actually survived it. It's just, oh. Okay, so Tanya's still living in New York. Still living her life. Okay, the next part of the Survivor series is coming soon. And you're going to hear the story of what true survival means. Just before I go, let me do these shout outs. Hello to Lauren Nikolic in Australia. Hello, Lauren. Your mum Julie asked for a shout out. You're in Australia? G'day, mates. Hello. Paul Maynard Thompson, again from Australia. This is the Australian shout outs, apparently. So, Paul Maynard Thomas, hello, Paul. And hello, Vicky Newton, Paul's partner. I hope you are both very well. Thank you for listening. Ginger, Dawson, James, a new Facebook group member. Hello, Ginger, I'm loving your input. Milani Matson. Now, I hope I said that okay. Milani Matson, thank you for your very, very, very kind words. Kate Dodds. Kate, keep up the good work with your A-levels. Just keep going. A-levels are such a ball ache. They are the worst in the world. You can do it. Just power fucking through it. Okay? Keep going. Alright, that's the shout outs. As always, join the Facebook group. It's amazing. It's a world into itself. Someone said on Facebook last week, and I think this is the nicest thing ever that anyone could ever have said. Aaron Ricardo said to a new member, welcome to the group. It's the best thing happening on Facebook. And it really is. It's actually brilliant. It's so brilliant. If you're not a Facebook fan, I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. You can email me, extraordinarystoriespodcast@gmail.com. Okay? Just find me. Just get in touch. Say hello. Say hi. Okay? Until the next Survivor story. Okay. Goodbye.
It didn't affect me really one way or the other. I would imagine from the look on his face.
I'm a survivor. I'm not gonna give up. I'm not gonna stop. I'm gonna work hard. I'm not gonna dish you on the internet. My mama taught me better than that.
Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over. Let's get it on. Let's do it. Let's get it over.